I think you also aspire to make a podcast. Why don't you try Anchor? It's free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor you will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple and other many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum internship. So download Anchor or visit anchor.fm. Episode 22 Podcast Review Tuesday Life of an Army Officer Captain Raghu Raman and beerbiceps. Are you also in love with podcast listening? But didn't it get heavy to consume some episodes? So I am here to help you. Hello everyone, your host Brahma here on the show I Got This Today, where on every Tuesday I bring you podcast episode review. Next time you get an episode which is heavy for you or worth sharing with world, then share it with me and I will review it and bring you all the from that episode. Today's podcast episode is of the podcast The Ranveer Show English. The episode number is 75. Its guest is Captain Raghu Raman, who is an army officer, and host is Ranveer Alabhatia. The podcast is broadly about army and its training. Before starting, I want to tell you that last Tuesday we got learning from a podcast episode which was based on Bitcoin. So check that episode too. Let's start. In this episode, Captain Raghu Raman talks about many things like army, academy, spirituality, wealth lessons from army or combat, and etc. He also describes his journey from army, but here I am going to focus on learnings and knowledge and not his journey and experiences. Let me tell you who is Captain Raghu Raman first. He has worked in army and after leaving his army, he also played major roles in companies like Mahindra and Reliance and also had a great corporate career. He is currently a motivational speaker. The episode starts with story of him getting into army. He says that he had no intention of joining army, but after he saw riots in 1984 in Delhi, he was amazed by seeing how army came over and take the control of whole situation. And in 1986 he decided to join the army. Then he tells us about academic training. On the question how intense is the training of academy, he says that training is intense because they have to operate in intense conditions in real life combat. They have to handle the stress of losing life. Next question by Ranveer was on what basis are people rejected, where he describes the process to get into Indian Army. First, there is an entrance exam after schooling or graduation, and also there are different entries. The second test is Service Selection Board. That is an interview which goes on for 3 days in which they check your leadership skills. He beautifully describes leadership skills. He says that leadership means to take people who are better than you to get them to work together and complete a particular mission. There is also a psychometric test in which they tell you an object name and tell you to form a sentence to check your psychology. Like they give you a word knife and they will tell you to form a sentence with knife and check if you want to kill someone with knife or save by cutting the rope. And that's how they check your psychology. Next question was how to handle deadly intense situation. On this, he says that once we are in the situation, we work with our muscle memory. But what's really stressful is fear in that situation, in which fear of responsibility is very stressful because you have responsibility of your co-workers and their families if they lose their co-workers, and this gives them more stress in any situation. Then he talks about relationship in army, where he says that the friends in army are for lifetime friends. He also describes instances with his friends too. He says that in army you get this true wealth of friends and values. here, he also says a golden statement, and that is, wealth is something that is left after all money is gone. And due to this wealth, army gives you a richer life. He also bursts myth that if you go into army, you don't have to study. He says that in army, you have to study a particular subject to its last depth. Then he also says that real life combat and combat shown in movies is totally different. Because in real life combat, the pressure of losing someone's life or your own life and the responsibilities of many people is very stressful. Then the conversation moves towards Siachen. Siachen is called as coldest battlefield, at least in India. In Siachen, there are many different adverse conditions which he describes. He tells us that before going to actual place for operating, soldiers are taken through a trained base camp where they are taught to many different things that help them to operate in a particular place. There, he also says that there is no sense of enmity between soldiers of two different countries personally, but in the war, circumstances are different. On question of spirituality in army, it tells us that yes, spirituality exists in army. Also, there are spiritual gurus who teach spirituality in army, as they have to witness continuous death of people. And at last, I will like to tell you the lesson given by him to all organizations that they have to keep multitude layers and one vocabulary for their organization. There are also some points that are discussed in the podcast, but it would be better if you get them directly from the episode. I have linked the episode in the description, so check it out. Also, some very important growth books are linked in the description at their lowest price. If you like the episode, then share the episode with your friends and family. Also, follow us wherever you listen to podcast. Also, don't forget to tell me which podcast episode you want next Tuesday to be reviewed. So now I will take your leave and see you soon.